Hello, time travelers. Welcome back to Old News, the podcast where the past gets its second headline. Today, we rewind to 1949, a year of ideological divides, groundbreaking debuts, and baby steps toward a new global order. Let's begin on the world stage. On April 4th, 1949, 12 nations, including the United States, Canada, and much of Western Europe, created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The alliance was designed as a fortification against Soviet aggression in Europe, and it marked a formal shift from wartime alliances to peacetime preparedness. An attack against one is an attack against all became the guiding principle of the West's collective defense. It was the first time the U.S. had entered a permanent peacetime military alliance, a significant departure from its pre-World War II isolationist tradition. But NATO wasn't the only nation-building headline that year. On the other side of the world, Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China in October, after years of brutal civil war between the communists and nationalists. Chiang Kai-shek and his forces fled to Taiwan, setting up a rival government. The world now had two Chinas, and the Cold War's balance of power took a sharp turn toward the east, and the world was entering a new era of atomic awareness and atomic fear. As testing of nuclear weapons continued in the desert and the Pacific, scientists and the public grew increasingly concerned about the effects of ionizing radiation. Research linked exposure to burns, sickness, cancer, and even genetic mutations, raising alarms about a force that had once been marketed as almost magical. This was quite a change from the radium craze of the 1920s and 1930s, when radioactive substances were widely and recklessly used in toothpaste, health tonics, cosmetics, and glow-in-the-dark wristwatches. At the time, radiation was sold as a wonder substance, promising vitality, youth, and even miracle cures. That illusion shattered as cases of radium poisoning emerged, most famously among the radium girls, factory workers who had painted watch dials with luminous paint and later suffered horrific illnesses. By the late 1940s, regulation had become unavoidable. The Atomic Energy Commission, AEC, established in 1946, took charge of overseeing the civilian use of radioactive materials. In 1949, the AEC began issuing licenses and safety standards, making sure radioactive isotopes used in medicine, research, or even novelty products were carefully tracked and handled. Universities and hospitals could still access these isotopes, but only under strict controls. Then, in one of the most consequential events of the 20th century, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb, codenamed RDS-1. The US had assumed it had a nuclear monopoly for years to come, but the Soviets' rapid progress shocked the world, and officially kick-started the nuclear arms race. Back home in the US, President Harry S. Truman began his second term, still riding the momentum of his stunning upset victory in the 1948 election. Virtually every poll and headline had predicted his defeat, but Truman's whistle-stop campaign and plain-spoken confidence carried him to victory, cementing one of the greatest surprises in American political history. In his inaugural address of January 1949, Truman laid out what became known as the Four-Point Plan. It promised continued support for the United Nations, a firm stand to contain communism, programs to foster global economic development, and the sharing of American scientific and industrial know-how with other nations. Though framed modestly, these ideas laid the groundwork for the post-war foreign policy that would guide the U.S. through the Cold War and included global aid initiatives that would extend American influence far beyond its borders. On the home front, Truman pushed forward with his ambitious domestic program, the Fair Deal. It sought to expand on Roosevelt's New Deal legacy with bold proposals for national health insurance, civil rights legislation, housing programs, and an expanded social safety net. Much of it stalled in a Congress resistant to sweeping reform, but some measures did pass, including an increase in the minimum wage from 40 cents to 75 cents per hour in 1950, an expansion of Social Security coverage, and new funding for public housing projects. In business and innovation, 1949 saw the founding of Sony in Tokyo by Masaru Ibuka and Ako Morita. Japan was still recovering from the devastation of World War II, and the company started as a modest electronics shop specializing in repairing radios and producing small consumer devices. Despite these humble beginnings, Sony quickly distinguished itself through innovation, including the development of Japan's first tape recorder, the Sony TR-55, just a year later. And in New Milford, Connecticut, the first automatic streetlight system was installed. Each light had a photoelectric sensor that detected ambient light to turn on at dusk and off at dawn. Just one example of the post-war tech boom, quietly reshaping American infrastructure. And 1950s suburbia got its prototype in 1949 with the expansion of Levittown, New York. Built by William Levitt, this mass-produced community of affordable homes symbolized a new era of American life: cars, lawns, baby carriages, and a rising middle class. It also revealed deep racial divides. Black families were excluded from owning homes in Levittown, a fact that foreshadowed battles over housing segregation that would erupt in the coming decades. In popular culture, this was a transitional year between the golden age of radio and the rise of television. Milton Berle, aka Uncle Milty, became America's first major TV star with his show Texaco Star Theater, pulling in millions of viewers and helping television sets become a new fixture in American homes. By year's end, around 1 million households had a TV, still a small number, but growing fast. In literature, George Orwell published 1984 in June. His dystopian vision of a future dominated by surveillance, propaganda, and authoritarianism felt chillingly relevant in a year of political paranoia and post-war restructuring. Terms like Big Brother, doublethink, and thought crime entered the cultural lexicon and still resonate today. In music, the big band era was winding down, and crooners like Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby were dominating the airwaves. But underneath it all, rhythm and blues was gaining steam, especially in cities like Detroit and New Orleans. These sounds would soon explode into a new genre that would define the youth culture of the 1950s. In sports, Jackie Robinson continued to break barriers in Major League Baseball. By his third season with the Brooklyn Dodgers, Robinson was not just a symbol. He was a superstar, batting .342 and stealing 37 bases. And over in basketball, the Basketball Association of America and the National Basketball League merged to form what would become the NBA, laying the foundation for a league that would grow into a global powerhouse. And finally, in fashion, another revolution was brewing. Blue jeans, once just workwear, were becoming casual staples, especially among young people, thanks to their presence in Hollywood films. That's a wrap on the 1940s. In the words of Winston Churchill, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Thanks for joining. Cheers.